Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the ROKER RAPPORT podcast in association with the Sunderland Community Soup Kitchen, and it's Gav back again after another Sunderland game. This time around we visited Charlton Athletic at the Valley. Unfortunately, we didn't come away with 3 points, we came away with 1, which to some people might be an improvement on recent results, to others maybe not. Here today to discuss the game with me and many other things is Tom Albrighton. Hi Tom.
Good morning.
Yes, it is morning. You don't look very bright. You don't look like you've had a coffee.
No.
I've had 3 to make sure I was a bit more sprightly.
Yeah, I was out last night and a bit more
optimistic. I can tell.
Too optimistic about what time I could have turned out of bed.
That's your fault, isn't it? And also joining us today, we're very pleased to be joined by James Hunter of the Chronicle. Hi, James.
Hi there, how are you doing, chaps?
Yes, very good. Like we were talking just before we came on, you're in your hotel still. You didn't come back from London straight away. You managed to have a nice layover.
Yeah.
A nice evening with Barnesy and Benno in the curry house, you were saying. So you've had a nice rest.
An evening with Barnesy and Benno. I mean, there's got to be a stage show in that, hasn't there?
A while ago, we had them on the podcast, and Nick's Mrs. Joanna, I've known her for years. She suggested after that we should do, at some point, a game of Mr. and Mrs., or Mr. and Mr. even, with Barnesy and Benno. They probably know a lot more about each other than nearly anybody, given the amount of time they bloody spend with each other. But Definitely. Yeah, we've got Nick on next week, by the way, so that'll be nice. But today we are talking about Charlton versus Sunderland, 0-0. I think it's safe to say that some of the reaction I've seen from it, a lot of people are disappointed that we weren't able to turn a decent performance into 3 points, James. Probably a little bit in that camp, although I do think that the fact that we got another clean sheet's a good thing. Performance was definitely better. But where are you at with that, given sort of the other results around and where we find ourselves on the table now?
Yeah, well, the performance was much better. There's no question about that. They carried on the performance level from Wigan. And that was a very positive thing. And the clean sheet, as you say, that's back-to-back clean sheets now. But unfortunately, the stage of the season is such that taking a point in games that you really should win, is not going to be enough, is it? You've seen other teams take advantage yesterday. Sunderland slipped to 7th in the table, and it's getting all a bit tight in the race for a playoff place. So I was heartened and encouraged by the performance, but unfortunately it didn't bring the result that they needed. I would have taken a worse performance and 3 points, and I suspect Alex Neil would feel the same.
What about you, Tom? Where do you lie? Are you happy with it or not?
No, not really. To be perfectly honest with you, I think given the run Charlton are on, we picked up a bit of confidence from last week. This stage of the season, I just don't think you can be too happy with the point. I know it's a point away from home, but we're really in a situation where we need to be getting as many points on the board as we can, as many wins as we can to get some momentum, and it just seems like another bit of a false start.
Yeah, well, yeah, perhaps. I was saying yesterday when we were chatting, I'm not obviously ready yet to judge Alex Neil. I think he's only been here 2 minutes, really, and I think it's a bit difficult. But there are certainly things about the way we're playing, James, isn't there, that are different. Obviously, the first one is we're keeping clean sheets. And a big factor in that has been taking out Callum Doyle, bringing in Arbonat Jamajli, who a lot of people, me included actually, weren't really sure whether he would be ready to play yet. I'd watched him a few times for the 23s and seen him play, and I thought, God, he's nowhere near. But to his credit, I think I heard his interview after the game with Nick last week. I think it's very clear that because he's waited so long to come back into the team, he's just thought, I've got to take this chance. I've got to. And you've got to say, he's done okay, and he's done really well. And I'm glad that he's proven me wrong, because I wasn't sure. You go to the 23s game, so you'll have seen similar sort of performances to me.
Yeah, I mean, as you'd expect, he did look rusty, as you would, after more than a year out. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there's any surprise about that. I think Alex Neil has said you're left he's been left in a situation where, do you carry on with Callum Doyle, who's played too much football and looks fatigued and jaded, or do you bring in a player like Arby, who has played hardly any football, and take a chance on him? Now, he had to do something, and he opted to rest Doyle and bring in Arby, and it's worked. It could have gone badly wrong. He could have brought in Arby, and it turned out to be the wrong decision, and You get caught out 2 or 3 times against Wigan, and everybody would have, understandably said it was the wrong call. But that hasn't happened. So, at the moment you're in a situation where Jim Adgley's played 2 good games. He's helped Sunderland keep 2 clean sheets, and you'd expect that he'll get better from here on in. However, of course, Callum Doyle came back into the mix yesterday. He was only an unused sub, but I think he's going to have benefited from that break, and there's a possibility that should he need to, then he can, because again you can't play RB for the last 10 games after having played no football. You can't then play him in the last 12 games of the season, can you?
Yeah.
So at some point he's going to need to pull him out, maybe in a game or two's time, and put Callum Doyle back in. So I think it's going to have helped having a refreshed Callum Doyle on the scene.
But the clean sheet has been very important, hasn't it, Tom? When you think about it, like, we have struggled all season to keep them, and it gives us a base to build from. Really, we've got to go into this little run towards the end of the season. And I said this when Alex Neil took the job. By the time the playoffs roll around, fingers crossed we're in the playoffs by the end of the season, and we will come on to that. But by the time the playoffs roll around, we've got to be ready for it. And a big part of that is don't concede as many goals, stop losing games, and everything else. Then it's a platform for it to build from, isn't it? You get a solid, consistent defence that can just do its job and is very functional. And then after that, the rest of the team should flow from there. I think the problem that Alex Neil probably found in his first few games was, because the defence was so weak, he's then had to pick players in front of the full-backs and in front of the centre-halves who can shield them. And I just think maybe yesterday, although we were all right going forward, that you could see that in the performance. You could see that the players that were on the pitch weren't necessarily giving us as much as we probably needed in the final third. And that's a conundrum, isn't it? When you're in League One, like Lyndon Gooch, defensively very solid, but we know where he falls down from an attacking perspective. And there is no other player really who's got any sort of balance in that wide position. We've got Clark and Roberts, 2 very good players. You can see it every time they touch the ball. They're good footballers. But then you think about it, well, where do they fit in? So it's difficult, isn't it, for Alex Neil to pick a team which sort of hits every area perfectly. And I guess at the minute, what he's trying to do is just establish a base to build from.
Yeah, I mean, he did have to tighten up the defence. I don't think anyone could argue otherwise. But one concern, to be fair, it's been a concern of mine pretty much since we've been in League One, when people have discussed the merits of keeping clean sheets. And just keeping clean sheets shouldn't come at the detriment of our attacking prowess. And granted, in certain situations, I think it is appropriate, sort of like when you're going away to Wigan, keeping a clean sheet there is very important, because before the game, you would have felt our only chance of winning was maybe sneaking a little 1-0. But my concern is situations like yesterday, where we were comfortably on top of the game, controlling a lot of the football. And when it came to the time for substitutions, the substitutions just became very like-for-like swaps. There was no real change. Like, we continued the full game with Evans and Matete in the middle. We were dominating the game, and Charlton weren't really a threat. So Alex Neil's got to identify those moments, and I think we were struggling to create any real clear-cut chances. Sort of, although Ross Stewart missed a few headers that he probably should have buried, is we couldn't get the ball into feet in the penalty area. So in those situations, he needs to look towards maybe tweaking the formation slightly, or bringing on players like Dan Neil, who can find that pass to do things. So I think, even though keeping clean sheets is probably a positive thing, Alex Neil's got to find the balance between when you have to go and be really defensively solid, which is like your away games at Wigan, and when you can go to Charlton, dominate the game for an hour, and then see the merit of not being so defensively astute to try and bring something else to the table to go and win the game. Yeah,
and I think when you look at the team he picked, I was wondering, does Alex Neil feel like Charlton maybe going to have more of the ball than they actually did? Because it seemed to me like a team that would be set up really well for counter-attack. Broadhead coming back into the side, James, was a shock to me. I wasn't expecting it. I know he'd been training, but I wasn't expecting to see him start. I just thought the way that the 3 at the back, the 2 wing backs, I thought, if Charlton, like most teams do at home, have quite a lot of the ball, then we're really well geared up to counter and maybe expose the fact that they're not so good defensively that way. But the way it turned out, Charlton didn't want the ball at all. They let us have pretty much all of it. And that sort of, as Tom just said, it meant that we weren't able to penetrate them maybe as much as we probably would have liked to.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously decided that he wanted to match up with Charlton and play three at the back. I don't have a problem with that. What you're saying about Nathan Broadhead, I wouldn't have imagined him starting yesterday. I would have thought that he would have been on the bench and come on for the last half hour rather than play for the first 70 minutes. But no problem with the way it happened, because he played well. I thought he looked quite lively, he looked quite sparky, particularly in the first half, which was Sunderland's best period of the game. And then just to Tom's point there, I mean, Alex Neil did change things in the second half. He moved, he actually switched to 4-3-3, and the game opened up a bit, and that was when it became a bit more end-to-end, and Sunderland had chances and Charlton had chances. So he did take that gamble, if you like, to take a bit more of a risk in the second half. Just weren't able to get that goal. But the other side of that is Charlton nearly won it with the last kick of the game. So you do leave yourself open to that. And I know that Alex Neil said in his press conference afterwards, he said, if we'd have scored one goal today, then we would all come away talking about how well Sunderland had played. And that's true. But equally, if that chance right at the death had gone in and Charlton had come away winning 1-0, we'd have been sitting here with a very different take on things, wouldn't we? So you do you do have that. If you'd have taken that risk and got mugged in the 93rd minute or whatever it was, then so much of it depends on the outcome, doesn't it? We can sort of go back and look at the individual decisions in the game, but one goal either way changes the whole perspective.
Yeah, and you look at sort of their results going into the game, and the worst team form-wise in the league, not scored for a few games, didn't score against us. I'm just looking at the stats here. Charlton, I didn't realise, hadn't had a single shot on target in the game.
Yeah.
Their sort of lack of threat up top, James, really, I think made it possibly an easier task for us than we might have expected, because we just had to get one goal. And I know we touched on it before.
Charlton had three good chances, although they didn't get any of those three chances on target, but they did have three good chances. But yeah, you're right. They offered much less of an attacking threat than I expected them to, much less than they did at the Stadium of Light. I thought that Bailey Wright and Arby and Carl Winchester handled Stockley and Burstow, the other lad, really, really well. They had the extra man in there, obviously going three at the back, and they had Stockley until the 93rd minute or whatever it was in injury time, when Stockley had that chance. He wasn't really in the game.
Other than that, though, we did have some I would like to highlight a handful of decent performances. Thought Dennis Serkin was really good, to be honest. I don't think he gets a lot of credit, and he hasn't played particularly well in the last 2 months or so. But I think actually, when you look at players who've improved under Alex Neil, I think since Neil came in, Serkin's probably been our most improved player. I thought that was his best game for Sunderland, me, Tom. I don't know about you. I thought that he just looked more assured, more confident. He was flying into tackles, which I've never seen him do. Getting forward, he was a threat, and he was in their box 2 or 3 times. He had a really good chance to score at the back post in the first half. So I thought he played well. I think we deserve to give him a bit of credit.
Yeah, like you say, I think it was his best game in a Sunderland shirt. But I think one big change that's come with Alex Neil, which has probably benefited Serkin more than anyone else, is that he just hasn't had that entire left side to defend on his own. Is too often this season, and especially during our bad run, we were very, very weak down the left-hand side, or anybody we did play down the left wasn't too interested in tracking back. And when you watch Serkin play, he likes to play with a high line. He is a very attacking fullback. He likes to get up and down. So, given the fact he's got a little bit of cover, it just means he can fly into tackles, because he's in 1v1 situations. He's not in 2v1s. He's not having to deal with overlaps. Does not know whether to come, whether to go. So he's really benefited from a slight tactical tweak that's been made over the past few weeks, and because of that, it's allowed him to play his best football so far.
Yeah, I thought Alex Pritchard was brilliant as well, James. And he's going to be a miss, isn't he? I think that you could tell by his reaction when he went down, took off his boot and launched it 20 yards away.
Yeah.
And then was carried off the pitch by 2 people. It doesn't look good for him, does it?
No, players know. Players know when you've got an injury, you know whether it's a serious one, you know it's a bad one, they know straight away, and he clearly, feels that was a bad one. There'll have to be a scan, of course, to find out the extent of the damage. But Pritchard has been, after a fairly slow start, has been such an influential player for Sunderland. First month or so of the season aside, he's been so influential. He's going to be a huge miss in the last 10 games of the season, and potentially in the playoffs if either he's not back till then, and assuming Sunderland get there, then that in many ways that's more important than the 2 drop points. I think yesterday, in my view, losing Pritchard, if he is out for an extended period, that'll be more important than the 2 points drop yesterday.
Pritchard, just looking at it, if he is out for a while, does Pritchard being injured then, does that maybe give Alex Neil a chance to bring Dan Neil back into the team? I know he's been absent for the past couple of weeks. He was another player who needed a rest. But over the season, we watched him kind of sit deeper and deeper on the pitch. So I'm just wondering there if maybe there's an opportunity there to bring Dan Neil back into the team, but in perhaps a more attacking role.
You could do that, or another possibility might be to bring Elliot Embleton in that number 10, behind the 2 strikers. He's got a bit more creativity than Dan. Dan's kind of, you could swap Dan in for Jay Matete, or maybe even play Matete and Dan Neil and drop Corey Evans. I just think that he'll want somebody with a similar kind of creative spark, and I think the closest he's got in that to Alex Pritchard will be Embleton.
I think from Embleton's perspective as well, if that is the case, he is really going to have to impress in whatever run he gets, because I think everyone, it's not unfair to say that Embleton, since he's came back from Blackpool, is flattered to deceive. He has had a few good games, but he's had as many anonymous games really as he has good games. So in regards to whatever happens to Pritchard, I think whoever steps in is really going to have to perform, and they're going to have to impress over the next potentially 8, 9, 10 games there, just to earn a contract or just to stick around for next season.
Yeah, I mean, Elliot's obviously been played in several different positions. Particularly he's been played out wide left in a few games, which doesn't really suit him. But I think in that Pritchard role, if you like, number 10 or just behind the strikers there, I think that would suit him down to the ground.
I'm more sort of in the camp of I would rather see Embleton there, just because he's more of a goal threat. I think he came on in the game at Charlton, and within a couple of minutes put a fantastic ball through, which just I agree with what you're saying, Tom. I think he does flatter to deceive often, but creative players do, don't they? Especially at this level, they're inconsistent. But I think if there's one player in the squad who has similar attributes to Pritchard, it's probably Embleton. The thing I think we're going to miss, there's 2 big things that aren't really often talked about with Pritchard. One is his work rate off the ball, which he doesn't get anywhere near enough credit for. He's brilliant at closing people down, winning the ball back. When sort of a bad pass is pinged into him and he's got 2 or 3 players around him, he always comes out the other end with it. The other thing is his leadership. He's always digging people out. He's always telling people what to do, and that's natural given he's probably one of the oldest players in the team. So then to replace that with a player who's a little bit more meek, younger, I wouldn't say Embleton's particularly great in the tackle. It's difficult. You're not going to be able to replace Alex Pritchard, unfortunately. He's, in my eyes, the best footballer in this league by a long stretch. And
you can add in his set pieces as well, Gav. You can add in his set pieces as well. Yeah,
his corners, his free kicks. I mean, Embleton is a good player, but you're on about the best player in League One here, I think. And let's just pray, cross our fingers, cross everything, that Alex Pritchard is only going to be out for a couple of weeks at least, because I dread to think, really, how we get through the rest of the season without him. I think you look at how effective Ross Stewart's been this season. A lot of that's been to do with Alex Pritchard and him playing in behind him, the set pieces and stuff like you just mentioned. So it's difficult. But I guess the other side of that, James, is we've got Patrick Roberts, we've got Jack Clark, who haven't had a run of starts in the team yet. And when, a player gets injured, it presents opportunity, doesn't it? And gives other players a chance to show what they can do. And while Elliot Embleton might be the most natural replacement for Pritchard in the team, you've got to look at those 2 and think, well, these are players with real quality. Can we get them in somehow?
Yeah. I mean, you're right. I mean, just to finish up on Pritchard, that just reminds me very much of that first season in League One, where lost Aidan McGeady when McGeady was flying not far off this stage of the season. and of course what an impact that had on the remainder of the season. You think if McGeady had stayed fit till the end of that season, Sunderland might not have gone into the playoffs at all. They may have gone up automatically.
Yeah.
But yeah, to what you were saying about Clark and Roberts, I mean, they're two talented players. I don't think we've really seen it since they've come to Sunderland, because they've been in and out of the side, mainly virtually exclusively off the bench. They've arrived short of match fitness, so we haven't seen them anywhere near at the best. Now this is an opportunity for one of those two, or maybe even both of them, to step in and step up to the plate and show why they've been at Premier League clubs, at top Premier League clubs. That this is an opportunity for them. The stage is there for them, but we need to see it from them. Patrick Roberts played in the under-23s on Monday night at his own request. He asked to play. That's always a good sign, I think, to have a player that says, yeah, I'm happy to play at Appleton on a Monday night in Arctic conditions. That'll do me fine, because I need the match fitness. So that was a good sign. Let's see if we can bring his undoubted talent to the fore, because in this league, in League One, he could be as influential as Alex Pritchard. But of course, we know that he's not yet fully up to speed. So we have to temper that a little bit.
Yeah. Just to round off on the game, Tom, 2 points dropped or a point gained, in your opinion?
2 dropped easy.
Yeah. What about you, James?
Yeah, very, very much so. In terms of the game, of course, yeah. 2 points dropped. Sunderland were by far the better team, created enough chances to win 2 or 3 games and didn't manage to get over the line. As I say, performance was encouraging, but we're at the point now where it's the points that matter over the performances.
Yeah. I imagine you met with Alex Neil after the game, and what was his sort of reaction to what went on, and what was the vibe you were getting from how he felt about how things went?
Well, like all managers in these situations, they're kind of trying to pick out positives from a game, and I get that. And of course, he was pleased with the performance, and he said Sunderland didn't get what they deserved. He said all the things that we're saying, basically. Frustrated at the result and not being able to put away any of those chances. But he did come away pleased with the performance, and he's a firm believer, and he said as much, that if you get the performances right, the results will come. And I believe that too. The trouble is, there's only 10 games of the season left now. And you can say, well, get the performances right and the results will come. But you can't afford to have too many days like yesterday. In fact, in Sunderland's situation, you can't afford to have any more days like yesterday where you get the performance right and you don't get the result. That's the issue. Right now, scrappy 1-0 wins are worth more than beautiful football, goalless draws. Yeah.
And the problem as well is that Wycombe have refound their form. So that's us out of the playoffs now. We're 7th. Luckily, Sheff Wed got beat. Plymouth, on the back of 2 defeats, have won again and have 2 games in hand on us, most importantly. So they're a point behind, 2 games in hand. And Ipswich are only 4 points behind us. I never ever thought at any point we'd be at risk of dropping behind Ipswich, but they're on my coattails as well, and then Bolton below them as well, and Pompey, who are the most informed team in the league at the minute, they've come right back into form. They've got 2 games in hand on us. If they won both of them, they would be on equal points to Sunderland. People are really going for us and going for those playoff spots now, and the problem is, isn't it, James, is that we just have to win our games. We can't worry too much about what's going on around us, obviously, but you've just said yourself there, 10 games left. We've got to look at our own fixtures now and think we've still got a really good chance of finishing in the top 6. But you look at it, I think 4 of the next 5 games are at home. 2 of those against really poor teams in Fleetwood and Crewe, and actually Gillingham, you could argue, are a poor team. So and Lincoln aren't having a great season. So I think if you were any of those other teams in the playoffs or around the playoffs, and you had that set of fixtures, you'd be over the moon, wouldn't you? We can't be daunted by it.
Yeah, and even more so than the fact that you got so many at home. You've got to look at some of the games. There's Oxford still to play. Sunderland have Rotherham still to play, and someone else in the playoffs as well, isn't there? Plymouth are in there as well. Yeah. Yeah. So they've got 3 teams in there that you've mentioned still to play. It's absolutely essential that Sunderland win those games. Partly for their own sake, but also to put a spoke in the wheels of those teams. So those matches become all important now, don't they? In the running, as well as, of course, putting away the teams at the wrong end of the table that you'd hope that Sunderland can beat, particularly at home. There's just so I think when you get to the last 10 games of any season, unless you're well clear at the top or well clear in the playoffs, every single game is crucial. And we've seen it before with Sunderland in the run-ins. I mean, you just can't afford to slip up, and you can't afford to have days like yesterday where 2 points slip through your fingers.
And we've got Fleetwood on Tuesday, as I just mentioned. They're on a rotten run of form. They're only 2 points above the relegation zone. They've just lost to Ipswich. They've just lost to Wigan. They've played other teams around us and got beat. And like I said before, we've got to win this game, haven't we? Fleetwood at home hasn't always been an easy game for Sunderland, but that was sort of when Joey Barton was manager, and he used to take those games very seriously, and so did his players, where now I'm thinking it might be a little bit different, but at the same time, they're scrapping just as much as we are, just for a different cause. They need to win. They've got to stay up. So it's going to be tough, Tom, isn't it? We've just got to win. And I keep saying this all the time, but when a poor team comes to your stadium, midweek especially, they're travelling through the week, you've got to look at that and think, if we don't win that game, there's something sorely missing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one issue going ahead is going to be, you're going to expect Fleetwood really to sit in. Is their game is going to be, they're going to try and sit in, defend deep, probably look for that ball over the top, try and hit us on the break. Charlton tried it a couple of times yesterday with varying degrees of success. So there's still that's still a slight chink in the armour. My concern is, especially without Pritchard, is that we'll just play somewhat into Fleetwood's hands. I feel like the past few games under Neil, there has been an over-reliance on crosses into the box to Ross Stewart, who doesn't really seem to thrive on that sort of delivery. I think a variation is what he thrives on. He has scored goals from crosses and corners, but he needs that mix-up in play, and he's not really getting in behind teams. And I just kind of feel if we're going to play to the same style we did against Charlton and rely on those crosses into the box, Fleetwood will just look to cut those out. And it's no real secret that in terms of delivery into the box, we're probably not one of the finer teams for it. So that would be a concern. I think we do need a little bit more variation in there, how we're going to attack. But yeah, I think it's going to be it's potential to be a very dour game, because I do feel like Fleetwood aren't going to come for the 3 points. They're just going to try and sit deep, sit and frustrate, and then maybe just try and, hit us on the break with one or two counter-attacks that they might have.
How would you approach it, James? What do you think you should do?
Well, I think, as Tom says, I think Fleetwood are going to come and try and grind a result out. They'll be happy with a point, definitely. So it's going to be up to Sunderland to find a way to break them down. I think he'll be slightly more on the adventurous side over yesterday. I don't think he'll stick with 3 centre-backs. I think he'll probably go back to a back four, probably 4-3-3 again. Take a bit more of a calculated risk and try to find a way to break Fleetwood down. I mean, Fleetwood have been on a fairly poor run themselves. They're at the wrong half of the table, aren't they? So you'd look at that from Sunderland's point of view, or from the point of view of any team going for the playoffs or promotion, and you'd go into that game looking fairly confident that you can get a victory from it. But the big thing is, with no Pritchard to do the heavy lifting, he's going to have to find an alternative, and that's where I think it's going to be an opportunity for Embleton or Roberts or Clark, to come to the fore.
I would like to see Roberts start this one. I just think when you're talking about a team who are going to sit in, you're not going to be able to stretch them, which is probably a game that would suit Clark because he's quick, good at moving the ball at pace. If they're just going to sit and camp around the box, they're going to be difficult to penetrate, which is why I think sometimes you need your ball players on the pitch, and that might be a really good opportunity then to give Patrick Roberts his first start, because although he is quick and he is very good at getting in behind and all the other stuff, he's a very two-footed player and he can create something out of nothing. So I would be tempted to play him, if I'm honest. I think we've seen Clark, we know what he can do, very good player. We haven't seen really enough of Roberts to make a solid judgment on him, and I just think, if there's going to be an opportunity to start this lad, let's get him in a game in front of the home fans against a team who aren't doing very well, and say to him, look, we've lost Alex Pritchard, who's a very creative player, who offers us a lot in the final third. I want you to go out there and I want you to try and fill that void, because we know you've got the talent to do it, and throw down a marker and lay a challenge down to him and say, look, you're here, you've got 10 games, prove yourself, and it might work, it might not, but sometimes you've got to try something different, haven't you, James? You've got to sometimes look at the quality you have in your ranks like we do. We've got so many good players not playing at the minute, and try and inspire them a little bit, maybe even to take the opportunity that they've been given.
Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me if Alex Neil does that on Tuesday and does bring in Patrick Roberts for a start, because he's shown that he's prepared to take bold decisions, whether it's bringing in RB into central defence instead of Callum Doyle, or whether it was yesterday starting Nathan Broadhead, when the pragmatic thing to do would be to bring him on for half an hour, and I think nobody would have complained if he'd have done that. So yeah, I think he's shown that he can and is willing to take bold decisions. So yeah, why not do that with Patrick Roberts? Why not play him in that 10 role? Give it a whirl. If it's really not working, of course you've got Elliot Embleton there that you can bring on and change it. But yes, somebody has got to step up to the plate and fill that Pritchard-shaped hole in the team, and why shouldn't it be Patrick Roberts? It should be the sort of challenge that he'll thrive on. You would think, but we all just hope that Alex Pritchard will be back at some point during this run-in to help Sunderland out, because he's the one really proven quality player that Sunderland have when it comes to that creativity.
Yeah, how would you see the game playing out then, Tom? To put you on the spot,
I wouldn't like to see either way.
Get off the fence.
I think it entirely depends on the team he selects. I feel like there's players like Gooch. I don't feel like there's a reason to select players like Gooch, especially against Fleetwood, because I don't feel like we're going to need that defensive aspect of the game. I'd rather see someone like Diaku perhaps play there, or Roberts, or Clark, someone who's going to be direct, who's going to drive at Fleetwood every time they do try and get out and relieve a bit of pressure. So yeah, I think it just entirely depends how he sets up the team. I think if he sticks with sort of the likes of Gooch and to an extent Evans, who are intrinsically sort of like there for the defensive contributions as much as the forward contributions, it'll end up being a scrappy game, probably scrape a 1 or a 2-0. I think if he throws caution to the wind a bit, sort of gets in some more attacker-minded players, some more direct players, if we play well, there's a good chance that they can be swept away almost.
Yeah, what about you, James? How do you see it going? I think we'll win, but I don't know if it'll be easy.
Yeah, it's so difficult, isn't it? It's so difficult to predict these kind of things. So you've got so many different variables. What team you pick, what team they pick. As I say, I think he's going to have to go for a more risky strategy. He's going to have to try and take the game to Fleetwood. I think the fans will expect that at home, and I think that that's what he'll do. They created so much against Charlton yesterday, so the creativity wasn't a problem. I know he likes Lyndon Gooch because Lyndon Gooch works so hard out wide. Diaku missed out yesterday with a slight injury. Whether he'll come back into contention on Tuesday, I don't know. Same with Defoe, he was also out with a slight injury. But it's so tough to tell. I think you're right, Gav. I think Sunderland will probably win on Tuesday night, but it may well be a scrappy 1-0 win, and I'll settle for that now if offered.
I'll settle for 10 of them between now and the end of the season. I don't honestly care anymore about style. I just think we've got to pick points up, and we've got to, like I keep saying, and people are going to get bored of us saying this, but we've got to be in good shape going into the playoffs. I think we'll be in the playoffs. I do. I know that's a little bit hard for some people to take on the chin. A lot of people are feeling, we've thrown automatics. We definitely have, and a lot of people think we aren't good enough to even make the playoffs now. But I still think we are good enough, and it's just about how we actually shape up going into that spell. We've talked on the pod in the last few weeks, James, about just the fact the last 2 times we went into the playoffs we've been rubbish. We haven't been good enough. And then when you go into the playoffs, you're flat, and it's difficult, isn't it, to then bring the mood back up. Whereas now we've got this run of games. We've got 10 games. 6 of them are at home. Quite a lot of them are against teams struggling at the other end of the table. And you've got to look at it and think, right, let's get ourselves as prepared as we can for those playoffs. Let's make sure we're in good shape. And a big part of that, as I said earlier, is the clean sheets thing. But the other part is getting some of these players fit. And, we haven't seen Broadhead for a while. We've got McGeady coming back. We've got Luke O'Nien coming back. All of a sudden, the squad looks very strong, doesn't it? And then you're looking a little bit more optimistically about our chances and the variety of options available to Alex Neil then for the rest of the season.
It's a bit of a mindset thing as well, Gav. I think I remember Jack Ross saying after that first season when Sunderland very narrowly missed out on automatic in the final week of the season and finished up in the playoffs, there was such a sense of disappointment around the club having missed out on automatic, going to taking that into the playoffs, and again even last season, there was still disappointment at missing out on automatic and winding up in the playoffs. This time it'll be different because Sunderland are scrapping for a playoff place. Let's be honest about it. There's nothing guaranteed about getting a playoff place at this stage. If Sunderland finish 6th or 5th, people will feel relieved. They'll be going into the playoffs not on a high, but they'll be going into the playoffs with a totally different outlook to they did that first season. And that mentality might make a difference. How people view the playoffs this time round, should Sunderland get in there, will be very different, I think.
Yes. Well, we'll know better on Tuesday, won't we? When we've played Fleetwood, I think we're all disappointed we didn't win, but there were signs of hope from the performance at the weekend. We've just got to go beat Fleetwood, as I keep saying repeatedly, but we do. We just got to make sure we win. A 1-0 would be absolutely fine with me. It means that we would then have only lost one of our last 6, I think. It would be 7 points from 9, which is an improvement when you look at how badly things were going. It wasn't heading in the right direction. Another win on Tuesday would be great. Then you're looking ahead to the weekend even further, and you've got Crewe, who I think are bottom. So, and I know in these games recently we haven't taken the opportunity, but we can't dwell on that. It doesn't mean we're not going to win these games, does it? It means, it means very little, actually. It means that if we go to Crewe and we go and beat Fleetwood, there's another 6 points. I'm sure teams around us will drop points, as they have this weekend even. So, yeah, we've just got to try and remain optimistic as best we can, really. I know it's difficult when people are really expecting Sunderland to win the division. And we're now talking about, well, we might not make the playoffs. Well, it is what it is. And I don't think Alex Neil will be sitting worried about that. He's been given the job with one task in mind, and that's to get promoted. That's literally it. Get promoted and worry about the rest in the summer. And as far as I'm concerned, that objective's still there. We can still get promoted, and it's just about how well prepared we are going into that spell, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
We really need to be aiming, don't we, for as many wins as we can possibly get. And obviously that's just looking there at how tight the table is we really actually need to batter teams like Crewe and like Fleetwood, especially if we're playing them at home, because goal difference here now could be worth a point in itself. And it's just, I think it's crazy how you look at how well the season started and how we were blowing teams out of the water, and now we're kind of like, we just need any points any way we can get them, when really by rights we should be coasting our way to the division above. Well,
some might disagree. I don't know if I agree that we have a right to do it. I agree with you in the sense that at a point in the season we looked so focused and the football was so good, but it was inevitable that you were going to hit a bad spell, and it was inevitable that the young players were going to run out of steam. And it's just, you look at the teams at the top end, Tom, and you see the experience they've got. That's why they're there. Rotherham and Wigan. I think the surprise package in that mix really are MK Dons, who've just been brilliant since they made that managerial change. But, I think we've brought the average age of this squad way down, and we've been missing. This is something that doesn't get talked about a lot, but McGeady and Luke O'Nien have been a big part of this team for the whole time we've been in League One, and they've missed big spells of football this season. So our experienced players haven't really been there. We have had experienced players, but we've sort of that core of the team that's always been there in League One. It hasn't been there, and we haven't adapted well to that at all. That is why, in my opinion, things have taken a spin. But we can't dwell on it. We're just gonna have to get on with it. We're gonna have to get on. Like I said before, we have players coming back. We've got, I think, a pretty favourable fixture list. I know we've got a couple of promotion teams in there, but I think if you look at who we've got to play, especially in the next few weeks, you've got to take that opportunity. I think the Rotherham game will probably get moved, so we might end up playing them more towards the end of the season. Rotherham game getting moved, for anyone listening, because I think that's an international break that weekend, and it's likely that the game will get called off. So, yeah, there's nothing to worry about. But we've banged that point home enough, I think. I think we've went on quite long enough. So thank you very much, Tom, for joining me. Go get some ibuprofen and cold water and coffee, and sort yourself out. Your mess. Thank you very much, James, for joining us. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Good to chat to you guys.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for joining us. I hope we'll be back after Fleetwood. I don't know. If we win, probably we'll have a reaction pod. If not, we will be back with a Crew preview later in the week. And on the site, obviously, all through the week, we'll be reacting to whatever's going on. So make sure you check that out. You can catch... I don't normally plug the guests, but I should do that more, shouldn't I? James, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter, @jhuntercron. I'm probably on Facebook too, but I can't remember what the address is for that. So.
And obviously in the Chronicle every day. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next week.